Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. Today we're going to have a little bit different conversation around chronic pain. And we're going to talk about how chronic pain, or I should say why chronic pain shows up in your body when you have unresolved emotional issues. When you are in the corporate world, sometimes you may have an accumulation of different life issues, or you could have something like emotional unresolved trauma from whenever you're a child or earlier in your life. And I thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about this because if you're in the corporate world and you have chronic pain, then you may need to call in sick, and depending on what type of job you have, if you are calling in sick and you don't get paid, then that's going to impact you. We're going to have a guest. This is going to be Dr. Andrea Moore, and she's going to be talking to us about how the chronic pain manifests in your body. Dr. Andrea Moore is a mom, wife, and recovering health perfectionist. Along her 15-plus year journey, she became a doctor of physical therapy, an orthopedic certified specialist, functional nutritional therapist, life coach, and patriarchy and perfectionism smasher. Through years of education, self-healing, and working with hundreds of women, she learned that it is always about coming back to yourself in order to live the life of your dreams. She now guides other women who are suffering from chronic pain back to their bodies and living in a way that is aligned with the truest version of themselves. This is going to be a super interesting conversation because, again, sometimes you don't know why you're in pain and you don't associate it with the emotional state of your body and your soul. You kind of you associate it with the body specifically, but sometimes it doesn't even have to do with the body. So with that, stay tuned for my conversation with Dr. Andrea Moore. Andrea, thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I want to ask you, I know that you work with people that have chronic pain, and we talked recently. And so when you say that you want people to be connected with their aligned self, what do you mean by that?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's such a delight. And what a great question to kick things off with, because yes, we feel like we hear that term thrown around a lot. And what does it even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think everybody has a different way that their authentic wisdom or their true self or their inner guidance, like whatever you want to call it, is really, it's like what resonates with you, you get to use. Everyone's kind of presents to themselves differently, but it's really about knowing what is right for where you are in your life right here and right now, in terms of like, what's the next action to take? And having that, like, sometimes it's like this deep gut knowing of like, oh, this is what I need to do for my body, or this is like the next decision to make. Sometimes it's just this like expansiveness, open feeling. Sometimes it's a little voice that appears. Again, what it's going to be like for everybody is a little different. And it's really, can we start to live by that versus by what we think we should be doing, by what society is telling us to do, or what our parents expected us to do, or what our friends or coworkers or bosses want us to do. It's like, can we live by our true selves versus just external factors?
I
So
like
that's,
that.
yeah.
So, women, and we're talking primarily to women in the corporate world on our episode podcast, but I think we're such people pleasers. And so a lot of times as mom, I know you're a mom and a wife. And so a lot of times our roles are we take care of everybody else, and then we're the last ones that we take care of, for ourselves. So I like the fact that you're saying it's whatever, it's for you, not for your husband or your kids. It's always like, I kind of think of that analogy of you're flying and then the turbulence comes on, and then you have to, make sure that you put the air mask on yourself before you can help anybody else. And I think that's the same, type of analogy. Now, we know that women in corporate are stretched very thin. They're obviously have a full-time job. Most people do. And, or entrepreneurs, they might be full-time entrepreneurs. And of course you have to take care of your family and your finances and your home and, yourself, and trying to exercise. And a lot of times that stress and all of the to-do list comes out through your body. And then your body starts talking to you, right?
Yes, absolutely. Our bodies communicate with us from the very beginning. And as kids, often that communication it's not nurtured, right? We don't know to start listening to it. And oftentimes we get messages, and usually it is so unintentional. No parent is trying to shut down their child's like inner voice and guidance. It just happens because that's what we're taught. But it's like from the moment a child falls and they're crying, right? And their parents like, no, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Or like, finish your plate, or like, no, don't go to the bathroom now, you need to wait till later, right? There's all these things that just happen that the child might be hearing a message from their body, and that message gets shut down. And then there's no intentional nurturing that we have of that guidance, right? It's not like there's like a balance out of like, okay, but here now we can like really nurture and listen to it, right? There's when do we learn how to do that? Literally never.
Right.
So our bodies have this beautiful communication with us, but it gets lost. And even if we have it, it almost gets told that we're wrong for having it, right? Like in school, if you need to go to the bathroom, but it's not bathroom time, it's like, you're not allowed. And it's like, wait a minute, something's wrong, but my body's telling me this, but this is telling me I'm not allowed, right? So it just becomes this really confusing thing that we have, where we just stop listening. And our bodies can only communicate with us so many ways. And if it's been whispering to you, if it's been trying to get your attention, and it's like trying to be like, hey, I need rest, I need to be nurtured, I need to be cared for, and it keeps getting ignored, no matter the reason. Might be really good reason sometimes. It's kind of irrelevant, right? At one point, it's going to be like, here's how I can get you to stop, through pain.
Oh gosh. So once you get to the pain, it's almost like your body has been, like you said, whispering. I love that whispering, because little aches and pains. And then when you're in like massive chronic pain, it's already been talking to you, and you haven't been listening because probably you're busy working, you're trying to take care of your house or your family or whatever. And so what are some specific messages that the body is trying to tell us?
Yeah, I love this question. What I want to emphasize before I answer it is, one, chronic pain is complex. There can be other reasons for it other than what we're going to be talking about today, but what we're talking about today always does have some application to chronic pain. There always is extra like emotional attachment, like things that come along with chronic pain. And then the other thing I was going to say is that what your body is trying to tell you really differs from person to person. So it really is a But what I teach is how to listen to your body so you can hear the message your body is sending. And common ones, though, because there are some really common ones, are like, hey, you're not doing what you were meant to do in this life. Like, you've gone so far astray of your passions, your desires, and what was really meant for you. Another common message is like, I just need to rest. I just need to be cared for and nourished and like given a break. Sometimes it might be, and this is probably not as common for those in the corporate world, but it could be. But like, if we have kind of almost shut down our lives and like really shrunken it to me, this can be like what happens when chronic pain's been going on for a while. It's like life gets really small. It's like, I can only do the very bare minimum. And sometimes pain is literally being like, you're like your soul just yearning for a more full human experience.
Oh, yeah.
And so the messages can feel like contradictory at times, or they really could be telling, one pain in one person versus another pain in another person. Could have one might be saying, go take action. The other might saying rest, right? Like,
Yes.
There is no one right message. And then the last thing, I could probably talk about this for an hour, but like the last thing is just because your body is sending a message doesn't mean you need to take action on what it's telling you. Because then the one other message that's really common, especially for women and especially for women in powerful roles, is this is not safe. What you're doing is not safe. Because historically, women in power, it's not safe to be a woman in power, right?
Right.
And so your body might be kind of freaking out of like, oh my gosh, you just got a promotion. Like, now you're going to be seen and heard. You're in charge of people. That's not safe. I'm going to get you out of this by putting you in pain. Like, let me protect you from like the, herds of men coming at you with spears or whatever your body is like holding on to, which doesn't apply anymore. Right. And so it's like, those are the messages that we want to hear and really understand and see with compassion. But then we have to update our system to be like, it actually is safe.
Oh my gosh, I just literally got that visual of a woman executive or a CEO that does step into that big role. And now it's like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? And that's kind of the message that you're saying, that you don't feel safe.
Yeah.
But I love you kind of reframing that to, you're okay, you are safe, nobody's going to come and spear your head off or anything. Gosh, that is so interesting. So when you recognize it, now you said sometimes you get a message from your body and you don't have to take action. So if you're not taking action, then what are you doing?
Yeah. And what I meant by that is like, let's say you're getting the message from your body. You're listening in, like you're stepping in that exact vision that you did. And the message is like, stop what you're doing. And often that might come in the form of imposter syndrome, right? You don't know what you're talking about. What are you thinking? Or like Brene Brown's, like, you're too big for your britches type of, right? It's coming in through that message. And that's not what we want to, we don't want to be like, oh, you're right, body, I shouldn't be doing this, right? That's not what we want to listen to it in terms of like, wow, why are you, like, we want to listen to it the way I often make the analogy is like we would a child. And you're a mom, you said, right? Yeah. And so it's like, if your child's coming to you and he's like, oh my God, there's a monster on my bed, it's terrifying. You're not like, what the hell is wrong with you? Gosh, there's no monsters. How stupid can you be? Like, get over yourself, right? Not helpful. Not how we talk to our hopefully not how we talk to our children. And it's not how we want to talk to our pain. We don't want to be like, gosh, and we also don't want to be like, you're safe, you're fine, right?
Right.
Because then your kid's like, oh my God, mom doesn't see the monsters. Now I'm really in danger because she's not seeing the danger that I'm seeing. And they're going to double down on their fear. Because not only is there now a monster under their bed, but their parents aren't, like the people who are responsible for their safety aren't seeing the threat they're in.
Right.
So we want to listen to our pain like we would a child, and that's getting down, at their level and being like, you're so scared. That is terrifying if you think there's a monster under your bed. Let's go check this out together. Let's together solve this. Like, I got you. I'm going to keep you safe, but let's explore. Let's not run away from it. And let's then help them see that, hey, look, there are no monsters under the bed. And maybe we have special monster spray. Maybe we have a few extra tools we use to help them be like, okay, like I am safe, right? But it's with compassion, it's with understanding. It's not through belittling or making fun of them or any of that's going to get them to shift, right?
Yes, no, I love that because, and actually I do know this author, her name is Laura Di Benedetto, and she has a book called The 6 Habits. And in her book, she talks about you having that parenting persona within yourself. And exactly what you're saying is talk to yourself as if you were the parent of yourself. And again, and I can see your demeanor, you're very compassionate and you're very kind, and I can tell that you talk to a lot of people because that compassion comes through. So I absolutely love that about you.
Oh, thank you.
Now, obviously, women in the corporate world specifically, they are working full time. And if they have this, chronic pain, what are some things that you typically work with or recommend to your clients whenever you encounter a situation like that?
Yeah, I think at first, like the very first step when it comes to working with chronic pain is really getting more clear on like the reason behind it.
Okay.
Because often we're given the message, like people go to the doctor, they're like, my back hurts, my neck hurts. And it's like the doctor says, often, not always, right? It's like, rest, take some meds, rest, stop doing what you're doing. And so what we start hearing is this message of something's wrong, like something's gone wrong, there's an injury, and I need to stop like moving. And the truth is when your pain has been around for more than 6 months, no matter the original cause, even if there was an initial injury, it takes about 3 months, maybe a little bit more with if like a really, big case of tissue damage to heal. So past 3 to 6 months, we are now talking about pain that is originating from a nervous system level, not from the tissues themselves. It's not from the muscles, the ligaments, the joints, things like that. Even if it feels very like, what are you talking about? My pain is right in my knee. Right. And that's where having a really, I think getting very clear on the reason is important, because if someone is trying to enter in like the work that I'm talking about and they're like, but there's an injury, but I'm going to hurt myself more, we're really not going to be able to enter in this more like emotional. We won't be able to hear like the deeper message. So one, it's like, get that cleared. If you've been to like, I usually tell people, it's like, if you've been to more than 3 practitioners and like what you're hearing very different responses, like maybe one person's like, oh yeah, it's because of like your meniscus. And someone else is like, oh, it's because you have tight muscles. And someone's like, oh no, it's because of like XYZ. No, nothing's fine. Chances are you're fine. Like it's not a physical cause. Now there's a lot of, like I could, do an entire episode on like how to know if it is more like mind body type of pain versus like pain that needs to go to a physical therapist or a practitioner. But chances are is if you've been to a practitioner, they're kind of like, there's nothing more you can do, or they're just telling you to rest. One, that's just neither is good advice. It's just the reality. So it's like either you're actively working on something and you're working with someone you trust, or it's probably mind body pain, especially if no one can figure out what's wrong, or you've had treatment. Let's say there is something that someone can find on a scan, but it's not responding. Usually it is, again, has this mind-body component. And so, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that to me, that kind of explains why you kind of feel this chronic pain. And then it's emotionally, it's very taxing, right? Because your body is hurting and you're going to all these doctors and nobody's able to tell you why. And then you kind of start questioning yourself, which kind of goes into my next question of women that usually have chronic pain are not stepping into their true selves, or sometimes they're not seen or acknowledged at work, right? I mean, that's kind of what we talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
So when they're not stepping into their true selves, I think is that the emotional piece that you're talking about?
It can be one of the components.
Okay.
Sometimes, yeah, I know there's like so much. I feel like there's always like so much, but sometimes it's literally just a buildup of each time you've suppressed your true self, right? Or it's gotten suppressed. It can also be childhood trauma that's finally like ready to be healed. Is another thing, is that it's like, and this is if you're someone who's listening and you feel like you finally got to this point where you're like, things were finally going well, and then this chronic pain came out of nowhere. Often it is from like there's finally now safety to look at what hasn't been looked at in the past.
Oh my goodness. That's like huge right there, because
yes.
Say you had trauma when you were young and now you're like happily married, like newly married, and you're like, okay, things are good. And then all of a sudden you get sick. Yep. You're thinking like it's recent, but it could be from your childhood trauma that is now coming out.
Yes.
So I'm curious, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you feel that childhood trauma typically pops up somewhere along your life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 100. Because anything that's happening before the age of 7, especially, is it's getting wired into our system. And it's wiring in how we're viewing the world. So often we're viewing the world through a lens of whatever was happening. So if your home wasn't safe, and we view the world through a lens of it's not safe. If we like feared not having enough food, right? It's like scarcity or like lack, like lack mentality can be showing up. And so it really does wire through. Now, the thing that I do want to say is that it's not a sentence to be stuck with, though, is I do think there's some narrative like, oh, you had trauma, so now that you're like stuck with it. And it's like, no, not at all. It's just something that's asking to be healed and to be looked at with curiosity and love and compassion, which wasn't available when you were a child. Right. You get to do it now as an adult.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful that it's not a sentence. It's not something that you just have to deal with. You can heal it. And so what are some things that what are some examples, maybe 1 or 2 examples of a client that has had a similar situation where now they're an adult and this chronic pain is coming up and they have identified that it's because of childhood trauma? Is that something that you can help with, or do they go to a talk therapist, or how would that work for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it is something that I can help with. Absolutely. Okay. And I do think it is helpful. It's not a requirement, but most clients that I have seen that have a lot of childhood trauma have been to talk therapy. Okay. And there is something that is really important about trauma processing where we do just need to tell our story and have it heard. But just telling your story and having it heard is not usually going to process the trauma. And often what happens with talk therapy is if we stay in talk therapy and never move to the next level, we get stuck in just the telling, and we get stuck in the cognitive level. And almost like the more if you can tell your story and it's like emotionless, and it's like, well, this is what happened to me. And when I was a child, I was sexually abused. And then my parent, right? It's like this like total, like, it is just further dissociating it. It's almost like now that each retelling just further dissociates it, and it's not processing it. Like you're never working through it. It's just cycling. So with the work I do, it's really bringing it into the body and letting the body process it through somatic work. And that's really getting clear of like, where is it living in your body? What does it need? What is it trying to say? A lot of times it's checking in of how old, like we can have these protective parts that think we're 5 years old. And so we want to help to update these parts to learn that we're older now, that we have resources, that we have a level of safety. And that takes working with this part, almost like I talk about them as parts. It's almost like you pull it out as like a separate child that you're working with, or a separate whatever it's presenting as. It doesn't have to present as a child. But, you asked for a client example. Like I did have a client who did have a lot of sexual abuse as a child, a lot of violence in her home. And so her body is just in this constant state of tension and hypervigilance, right? It is just waiting for the next attack. And rightly so, that's going to create chronic pain. If your body is tense all the time, constantly hypervigilant, waiting for the next attack, which we might not even realize, right? Like if you've lived with that all your life, often you don't even realize that you're constantly tense. That's like when you go to the massage therapist and they're like, oh my God, your muscles are hard as rock. And you're like, I'm relaxed. And they're like, relax. And you're like, I am. That's usually like a sign that you're just living. I mean, and that's me, to be fair, of like, yeah. And I didn't even have anything like that for my childhood. And my body was just in this state of tension. And I'm like, I am relaxed. And it's like my arms like in the air, you know what I mean? Like, right. And it just says, because it's all we know. It's right. It's all you know, or it's all you've known for like 20 some years. Like, so what we've been working with her, because she's, and so someone I'm still seeing, is really helping these younger parts that are because these parts are protective, right? When you're young, to brace for an attack is there's a protection to it. To numb out, to dissociate is protective. It's what you need to survive through childhood. Then these parts get stuck, thinking that they're still 6 years old, thinking that they're still dependent on the adults in their life that aren't reliable to provide them the care, for thinking they have to continue to figure out how to people please so they can get food.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever it just might be care, or like, it doesn't have to be some extreme trauma. Like it really can just be emotional, like, not even neglect, just like a lack of awareness of emotions is really honestly what it is a lot of times. And so once we can help these parts, like bring them out, help them, one, understand what they're holding on to, what they're protecting from, and then really compassionately, slowly, gently help update them to like, hey, like look around, like we're actually an adult now. They finally get to like go be a kid again.
Wow.
Like they can that part gets to let go and be like, oh my gosh, I don't have this 5-year-old part doesn't have to be the one that feels like it's protecting you.
Right.
Because that's a big job for a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old shouldn't have that job.
Absolutely. Wow.
So we kind of work through, release that job from that part, let it know that we're here to take care of it now, because we are the adult now. And it gets to go, and again, in your mind's eye, like it gets to go play then. It's however you want to work through this, And that's like, obviously a process I guide through and whatnot, but that's just a little bit of an example.
That's so interesting, because I think that's kind of one of the reasons why people as adults act as, that 5-year-old, that hurt little 5-year-old, yes. Not to bash men, but I think a lot of men have that situation because they're not as good at dealing with their emotions as women are, because we usually have that one, either a sister or soul sister that you can like, and you like say everything to, and then when you say whatever's happening in your life, at least for me, it kind of releases it, and then it's like not that big of a deal. It's like, I have one friend of mine, like we get together like every 2 or 3 weeks, and we meet at like 9 a.m. and it's like noon, and we're like, okay, we're tucked out, we're good.
I love it.
It's like almost therapy, because we support each other, and we have that really amazing intimacy where we are helping each other decipher, that makes sense, no, you're wrong, or he's wrong, or they're, or whatever,
Yes.
So, but that's very therapeutic, and men don't generally have like those heart-to-hearts with other men or people or whatever. So I think you always see, you always hear this comment, and this is generic, like, oh, he's a narcissist, he still acts like a kid, that kind of situation.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously women can make themselves small with this chronic pain, especially in the corporate world, and because they may not be taken seriously by male counterparts. when you think about a woman in the corporate world, and for me, my mission is to try to eradicate the gender gap so that women can continue to advance in their corporate careers.
Yes.
What would you say to a woman that has the chronic pain, that maybe has that emotional, thing going on, or they may not even recognize it, and it's coming out in the corporate world as not being seen or not being acknowledged?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's really helpful to take a step back and see how you can become an outside observer of your own life. Almost like, let's say there was a meeting and you were like, I wasn't heard, I was taught, right? And it's like feeling like that. It's like if you like imagine there was a movie camera and you were just watching it. It's like getting really clear on like what, like you get really analytical about it first before we go woo-woo and inwards. Like I'm a big fan of the like combining the two of like what really did happen. Because there are some times where we do misinterpret a situation where maybe like there is some, we'll just assume it's a guy, sorry, no, but there's some guy and he interrupted you, but he's interrupting everyone. Like it's not even personal, right? Like it's just, he just interrupts everyone, men and women. And so it's like, oh, that just isn't even about me. Like it literally means nothing about me. And then there might be a time where you're like, my ideas weren't heard. No one acknowledged them. And then when you really look at it, you're like, I didn't say my ideas.
Oh,
like I never, right? We're saying it in our head. Maybe we tried, but like it didn't actually come out. Or then there might be a time where you did say your idea and it is getting blown over and it is not being paid, right? So it's first just being like, what really is happening? And if you do have a trusted coworker in a situation like that, to bounce that off of like that, I know that's not always going to be a possibility, but that is always helpful because sometimes we really can't see things for ourselves, right? It is hard to take that third party observer. But so the action then that you would take would really depend on like, what are the cold hard facts here?
Right.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
I like that you said, kind of look at it from an objective perspective. My husband listens to my podcast. He's going to laugh when he hears me say this, but a lot of times we'll be having a dialogue and I'm like, you said this, and he said, I never said those words. Where are you getting that? You're making up stuff in your head. And then when he's like, this is what I said. And then when I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm like, okay. So now I'm trying to be better about, well, you said this, but this is what I heard. Is that what you meant? And so he always says, just ask me. So
yes, it's such a beautiful practice. And I love that but it's like, one, just acknowledging that we all do it. Like nothing's gone wrong. It's how the brain works. The brain's always going to see things through a certain lens. And so it takes, asking that question of like, wait a minute, this is what I heard. And then we can get curious about like, wow, what lens was I wearing that's what I, right. And that's the lens of like kind of what we talked about of like, we're childhood trauma or something that happened. It's like, that's what kind of like puts a default lens on us. Like whether it's perfectionism or the world's like people are out to get me or I'm not heard. Like, that I was just, my son's teacher actually sent me a message the other day and I had such an emotional reaction, like was so like triggered in my system, was like, I don't know how to respond. And I was just like sitting on this for like hours. And I was like, I can't believe she said this. And I'm like talking to my husband, we're like having this whole conversation about it. And then I went back to, I finally was like, okay, this is how I'm going to reply. But before I replied, thank God I did this, I reread the message. I was like, oh, that's not what she said at all.
Oh my God.
Literally not even what she said. I was like, I just saw it wrong. And it's just being like, oh, of course my brain does that because that's my lens. And like, it's what I'm really like, again, and I thought she was really isolating my child. And it was like, it was something that just triggered a lot to me or in me. And of course it did because it made sense of whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, now we can address this, right? It's like not judging ourselves for doing that in the first place. We all are humans with human experiences and human brains.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes along with the point of it depends on the mood you're in, because my husband and I can have the same conversation, and if I'm in a good mood I respond one way, and if I'm in a bad mood I respond a different way. So that just goes to, and I think people as a practice, when you get, an email like that, especially, in the corporate world, the practice is to just pause and wait a day before you respond, because the emotions are, get dissipated. And like you can go back and reread it and you're like, oh yeah, that's not what she meant at all.
Literally just read it wrong. Yeah.
And the other point that I was thinking about this, sometimes maybe you don't have an emotional trigger, but you procrastinate to address something. And then you have all this suffering, all this like dread, and oh my gosh, I'm going to have this conversation. And then that to me is more painful and suffering. When you just have the conversation, you avoid all of that pain and suffering. And that has happened to me, whether it's with my kids or my husband or whatever. I'm like, man, if I had just addressed it, a week ago, I wouldn't have to, like, all that, thoughts would not have taken up space in my head.
Yes.
And it's just like, I've made myself suffer, have anxiety for all that time for no reason, because it was like a non-issue.
Totally. Oh my gosh. And yes, I do that all the time too. But yes, this is huge, because it's often what creates procrastination is like this, having a lens of perfectionism of things, and perfectionism both in like ourselves, but also like this perfectionism in this what the outcome should be, and this like really heavy attachment to the outcome. And ultimately we can't control the outcome of such. You can't control the outcome of a conversation, so we procrastinate it because we deep down know that we can't control it, or that we're worried that we might not be the outcome we want. So it's just like we procrastinate, we delay having it. And often there can be, depends with procrastination, if you're someone who finds yourself procrastinating a lot, especially when it comes to like showing up, like maybe asking for a promotion or having a tough conversation with a coworker, or you have a really good idea and it's presenting it, when we are procrastinating things like that, oftentimes it can be actually a degree of freeze response, because we're putting ourselves out there, like, right? We're asking ourselves to get vulnerable. And if that doesn't feel safe to the system, it's like, well, I'm just going to procrastinate doing it.
Yes. Oh my.
I don't want to be seen, right? I don't want to be heard.
Yes. Now, as far as chronic pain, actually sending a message so that women can empower themselves so that they don't hold back. How do they do that?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. And I think the big thing is making it a practice to start to nurture that connection between your mind and your body, your mind and your authentic self. Again, whichever way you kind of want to look at it, because oftentimes there is a message. We have something we want to say. If you're working in the corporate world, you have important things that you want to get done.
Yes.
You're doing it for a reason.
Yes.
I'm assuming the women listen to this like love their jobs and like have things that they want to accomplish. They have big ambitions and dreams. And so when we can keep checking in with our body of like, am I on the right path, of like, am I saying what needs to be said, and just letting our body talk back and following that guidance, it naturally is going to empower us. It's naturally, going to increase your confidence in what you have to say as well.
This is awesome. I love it. Okay, so I know that you're a doctor of physical therapy. You have you yourself are very accomplished. You did orthopedics, functional nutritional therapist, life coaching. So how did you kind of hone in on the chronic pain having that emotional and physical component? How did you get here with your education and your career?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because in physical therapy school, I graduated in 2011, so 11 years ago now. And it really wasn't talked about. Like we very briefly discussed chronic pain, and then it's like, all right, go out, treat patients. And I just started getting all these patients on my schedule, women, especially, that they did not fit the textbook at all. Like, it didn't make sense. Like, they weren't responding as they were, like, should have respond, quote unquote. Like, things were like, you test out their muscles and look at their range of, it's like everything looked fine. Or if it didn't, then they didn't respond to the treatments that should have treated effectively. Like, we could literally be working on strengthening, and it's like their muscles wouldn't strengthen. And it's like, what the heck? Like, this doesn't, like, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't add up. And not to mention their pain would kind of be all over the place. It'd be inconsistent. And I myself also was having chronic pain during this time. And mine also was not responding to traditional physical therapy. So I'm like having a little crisis here, like pretty much before I even graduated, of like, what am I doing in this profession that I can't even help myself? And I was lucky enough. So I worked at an amazing holistic clinic, and I pursued a residency program in orthopedics. And within that program, we really started learning a lot more nuance of chronic pain and how it is all chronic pain. 100% of chronic pain is due to nervous system sensitization. Again, no matter the original cause, even if there was an injury, chronic pain past the 6-month mark is always going to have a nervous system sensitization as what's creating the pain itself. And so we learned that, and that was like really drilled into my head. And like, it really was just something that interested me. So I kept kind of learning more about it, because I have to keep taking continuing education. So I was just always really fascinated by it, because I was getting people on my schedule that had pain for like 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, like, and, I really just started asking the question of like, okay, so we know it's nervous system sensitization. And at that time, it was kind of like, oh, just tell people it's nervous system sensitization and they don't have to worry about further injuring themselves and you're good to go. And I was like, that was not doing it. The people are like, cool, I'm still terrified and I still hurt. And I'm like, there's gotta be something more. So I'm like, what creates the nervous system? Why do some nervous systems get sensitized while others don't? Right? I was just like really curious about that. And so went through the nutritional therapy route, went through the life coaching route. And all of this is like alongside my own story and my patients. And then it was really when I finally found the like somatic world of really connecting into our nervous system and realized it was possible to rewire your nervous system and actually decrease the nervous system sensitization through working with the nervous system. And I was like, oh, these link perfectly together. So I actually learned about all the somatic work that I learned, the trauma work had nothing to do with chronic pain. I was just able to link it all because of everything that I already knew. It was like this, everything I learned about chronic pain just kept coming back to, well, it's because of nervous system sensitization, and that's it. And then everything from the other world was like, and this creates nervous system sensitization. I mean, they use different words, but I was like, oh, that's that. I was like, there, we just like put these two together, like, and they bridge perfectly together. Why is no one else seeing this bridge? So yeah, that's probably a really long story. And
yeah, no, that's fascinating how you were able to connect those, because I think you're right. Doctors or traditional doctors, physicians, typically, they put a Band-Aid on you and give you a pill and send you on your way.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think a lot of people are wondering now, it's like, who's responsible then to finding the root cause? And we as individuals know that we're responsible for our health, but even when we reach out and the doctors keep saying there's nothing wrong with you, but I still feel pain. And then I know someone that's very close to me that is chronic, they have chronic pain, and sometimes they almost feel like, do people believe me? Because you say it all the time, I don't feel well today. And after a while, it's like, well, do you really not feel well today? That's what they're thinking, that people think. Like, obviously when someone's in pain, they're in pain, and you're like, okay, and I think especially at work, in the corporate world, if you have chronic pain and you have to call off, call in sick or whatever, I think that's going to show up a little bit more too.
Yeah.
And calling off costs you money. Especially if you don't get paid if you don't show up for work, that will cost you money. Obviously, medications, going to doctors, all that stuff costs you money. So if you are if you're a woman that's in this situation and they want to work with you, Dr. Andrea, like how do they work with you?
Yeah, so I work both one-on-one and I have a group program. And my group program, I really actually take people through all of these steps and processes and how to listen to your body and how to get the safety in your body to even listen in the first place, because it can feel intimidating to listen to your body. If anybody's ever tried to like meditate or do anything like that, and they're like, my mind just races, like, yeah, exactly, like that was me too, and that's all my clients. So this is like a little bit of a different way of listening in. It's not just sitting in silence, because that can feel very scary for the body. So yeah, it's really through my group program. And then, you know, if you need extra one-on-one coaching, that is something that I offer for people that are in my group program. So they have all of the tools and resources.
And you also have a podcast, right?
I do. Yes. And there is tons of information in the podcast. It's called Unweaving Chronic Pain.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I talk a lot about, like, I have more recent, I think I never remember what episode is which, but like, I think some of my more recent episodes, I think it's like maybe my early 40s episodes. I have a couple that are really on the medical community and kind of why doctors do treat pain the way they do and why there is a lot of gaslighting that happens, because ultimately your primary care physician doesn't know this stuff. Like, they aren't taught that. Like, they're not trying to, I mean, whatever, I'm sure there's exceptions, but like, they're probably not trying to be a jerk when they're like, there's nothing we can do.
Right.
Like, it's because they literally aren't taught what to do. So it's like, they don't know this. It's a gap in their knowledge. So if you aren't getting the support you need, often going to doctor, a different specialty to specialty isn't going to give it to you, because it's simply not taught unless they have gone out and you know, done this research for themselves and specifically work with chronic pain and specifically talk about how they do treat the root cause. Like, chances are, like, literally a gap in knowledge. So a lot of it is advocating for yourself, which just becomes extra hard when you're already in pain to begin with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard enough, you know, when you're healthy advocating for yourself, let alone, you know, being in chronic pain all the time. But I am definitely going to recommend your podcast to a few people that I know, because this work is definitely needed. And I think a lot of it, like, do you have any examples of or any situations with your clients where you've identified an emotional trigger and then the chronic pain kind of dissipates? Does that happen?
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely.
Really?
All the time.
Wow.
Yes.
That's hopeful. You know, like, you're giving hope to people that their chronic pain can actually go away.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Like 100, like, I have great results in chronic pain, literally like dissipating. I mean, it can, like, it's, I always want to be careful about the way I speak to it, of like, I think there's a lot of quick fix mentality in our world.
Right.
And while this work doesn't have to take super long, there is work and intention that has to go into it. It is a journey. It is really a willingness to go into some of the hard stuff. Like, it's not easy work to face some of the things that are deep underneath, which is why we numb out and avoid it. It's easier to sit back and watch Netflix. Like, I love to do it too, than to be like, what deep emotional trauma haven't I investigated today? Like, right. And like, we do this work in small doses. It's like, I was just having this conversation with a client of like, the point of this work is not to live in it. The point of this work is to like do it in little bits of what you need, so you can go live your life exactly how you want. Like, we don't need to perfectly heal everything. There's no perfectionism around this work. It's just like, what needs to be released. It's like all of this starts to build up in our system, and it's like our body can't hold anymore. So it's just like, where can we just start letting some stuff go? And sometimes just having it be seen and heard and validated is enough.
Yes. And I just want to say, like, a comment about the doing the work thing. So I met my one friend that I meet like every 2 or 3 weeks. She's always been like into self-development. And I met her, I guess, way back in like 1993. And, you know, at the time, I started having problems with the relationship that I had. And, you know, she would say to me, you got to do the work, Rosie, you got to do the work. And I was like, what work are you talking about? I have no
Yeah.
clue what you're talking about, because at that time I didn't really know about self-development or
Mhm.
like all the work that I do now. I had no idea, what it was back then. And now, when we all like, okay, yes, I know I got to do the work. So it's
Totally.
such a completely different mindset. And to my point to that is that people may not know that there's work to be done
Yes.
in this situation.
100%. And I think with chronic pain, which is why I'm so just like delighted to be on a podcast like this, is that oftentimes since we are told so many times, there's nothing that can be done. Just stop squatting, just stop running, stop, don't bend over anymore. Don't do things that your body needs to do and is designed to do. We're just told that that's our only option. We don't know that there's something that can be done. Because
Right.
how would you know? And I'm here to tell you that there is so much that can be done if you want to get back to moving, if you want to like get back to feeling good in your body. Like it absolutely is possible, 100% possible.
Do you think this work applies to someone that has sleep issues?
Oh yeah. And it's funny because while my work is centered around chronic pain, and I really think there's just something really special about the clients I see with chronic pain who just like are these like high achieving, mission driven women. Like I just see this connection because I do think it goes back to what I said earlier of like there's a lot of fear in our system for being such like a woman whose voice is being heard.
Sure.
Like I see that theme a lot. But like ultimately with my clients and like within my program, it's like we don't talk about pain that much. It's like it ends up being about all the other stuff. And yes, like I had a client recently who she had pain obviously, but sleep was a huge issue. And it's like through our work, it's like she was sleeping through the night because again, when your system's in hypervigilance, it's really hard to get a good night's rest when your body's like, I'm going to be attacked at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is all unconscious thoughts, right? Like logically, we know we're safe. Logically, you can be like, I have my alarm system going, like I'm safe in bed, like whatever. But if your subconscious doesn't feel safe, it doesn't matter. You can't out logic your subconscious.
Yes. Oh gosh. That's a quote.
I've tried, right, trust me.
You can't out logic your subconscious. That's definitely a quote there. And just to be clear, do you work with both men and women?
Yeah, it's funny right now. I do like in my program there are only women, but I just ran a smaller program and there was one man in it. Okay. But I don't limit it to women. I've worked with men in the past. I think I just naturally tend to attract women, but like truly, like it's not. There's no requirement to be a woman to work with me. Like any and all are welcome.
I think that kind of goes back to the fact that women are more willing to explore their emotions versus men, where, men traditionally are like, let me just fix it for you.
Exactly.
My husband, I have had that conversation many times. Like I tell him something and he's like, gets into problem solving. I'm like, you don't need to fix it for me. I'm just talking to you. Just like stop fixing my problem. so now
he have my problems.
So now he knows. It's like, do you want me to tell you what I think, or do you want me to just? So
I love it.
We're getting better. Okay, well, obviously this conversation has been fantastic, and I love the work that you're doing. Is there any 2 concrete tips that you can leave with the listeners as to what they could possibly do if they're in a situation like we've been talking about?
I think first, just really, I want to like come back to the outside observer of just start getting curious without judging yourself. No judgment. It's just like, wow, that's fascinating that this happened today. Or like, like what could be? What if my pain was emotional? What could it be? And just like letting your body just put it out there with this pure curiosity and compassion. Without the judgment piece, which can be the hard part sometimes. And so when it's just kind of asking yourself a different question, if you've noticed that if you feel like your pain has always been like, oh, I'm stuck, I'm limited, it's like, well, what if it could be different? What if I could heal this? Like, what would life be like if I could explore this? Right? It's just playing around and seeing what comes. You don't even have to do anything you hear. It's just like throwing out a different question. And then I think the second tip is just to start checking in with yourself more throughout the day. And a great time can be like after you go to the bathroom, just like washing your hands, taking a little extra time, maybe actually going for the full 30 seconds you're supposed to. I'm gonna guess if you're in the corporate world, you're probably like, oh, I gotta get back to work, right? Let's be honest, most people probably don't. And it's not even for the sake of germs. I mean, bonus, but just literally to like, while you're washing your hands, just gives you just like, even if it's just like feeling the water on your hands, of feeling what it feels like to touch your own skin, of just taking that moment to be like, let me just breathe. And like, hi, like I'm here. And if there's a mirror there, right? It's just like checking in of like, what am I feeling right now? And it might be like, I'm feeling super stressed right now. And it's like, I am super stressed. Okay. You don't have to do like, it's like not even making any need for action or to do anything different. It's just like, oh, fascinating. Right now, I'm super stressed. Okay. And just like letting it be. We have so much attachment to like, oh, what if I check in and then I have to do this and this and this and this, right? Now I got to solve it all.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah. I
just
vividly remember when we were all in offices, because now we're all remote, but I vividly remember like I'm at my desk and I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, just do one more thing. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I have to stop, go to the bathroom. And as I'm washing my hands, I was doing exactly what you were doing. Okay, I got to make this phone call. I got to go to this meeting. I got to, and then I have to leave at 4:30 to go pick up my kids. When my kids were little, I have to, so we're never in the present moment, or I should say, we're so often not in the present moment. But I love your just washing your hands and just being intentional about paying attention with, feeling the water, feeling the soap, so I am going to put that into my practice.
I love that. And I love that you even mentioned the whole like, okay, just one more thing before I go to the bathroom. That's like another great thing is like, when you feel the urge to pee, go pee. I have to remind myself of this one all the time. I'm like queen of not doing that myself.
So like, ridiculous. It's like,
right?
just one more thing, I have one more meeting. And then we often say it all the time, like, because we're meetings back to back and someone literally is like, I have to take 2 minutes to take a bio break,
Yes. Yes. And it's like, yeah, that's where then like after a while you start to realize like, wow, if like your schedule is so set up that you don't have time to pee in it, it's a problem. It's incompatible with taking care of our bodies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Well, this conversation again has been wonderful. I would like to give you the opportunity to just leave our listeners with any final thoughts.
Just that if you are experiencing chronic pain, that it doesn't have to be like this. Like if you're feeling constantly stressed and frazzled, and then on top of it have the fear and anxiety about what the pain is going to mean for your future, it's like, what if that could be an invitation to something different? What if the very presence of that chronic pain, probably the thing that you are not a fan of, is actually just an invitation from your body to just get to know it a little better and to check in with yourself.
I love that. So, All right. Well, Dr. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, this was fabulous. I appreciate your time.
Oh, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.
I just have to acknowledge that Dr. Andrea Moore is such a compassionate doctor. You can tell right away that she's just very gentle and compassionate. And I think she is an amazing human being. And I've only met her for about an hour and a half or so, but you can definitely tell. Some of the things that I got out of our conversation is that our bodies communicate with us from day one, and it's how we are socialized that we quiet those messages down. Another thing is that our bodies whisper messages to us throughout our life, and if you don't listen, then your body is going to start screaming at you, and that's going to be when that chronic pain or when that pain comes up. So those are just a couple of things that I kind of took away from our conversation. And another thing, we were talking about women going into maybe an executive role or a C-suite role, and women traditionally are not leaders, from way back when. And sometimes you as a woman going into that role, you think, oh no, what did I get myself into? It's not safe. And that's kind of like the lizard brain of like thousands of years ago. And you kind of have to reframe that message to say, it is safe. I can do this. It's okay. So with that, Dr. Andrea left us with 2 tips. The first one, she said, become an outside observer. She says, get curious about your pain without judgment. So use curiosity and compassion. Like, why would I be feeling that? You kind of have to go inward a little bit. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is, she says, start checking in with yourself throughout the day. And a good time to check in is when you go to or after you go to the bathroom and you're washing your hands, kind of feel the water, like the warm water running in your hands, kind of feel your skin, your hand, one hand touching the other hand, and just kind of be in the moment and breathe. So I am going to start implementing that in my practice because it's so important for us to be present. So critically important. Again, our bodies are talking to us. If you feel the need to talk to somebody, Dr. Andrea was just so kind and generous again. She is gifting us, or gifting you, the listeners, a complimentary 45-minute consultation. All of Dr. Andrea's contact information is going to be on the episode blog. So when you go on Apple, for example, and you're listening to this episode, there's a link that says episode website. You click on that, and that will take you to the blog where you will find her and Dr. Andrea's contact information, as well as her calendar link to schedule that 45-minute consultation. So if you are in a state of chronic pain, I really urge you to take her gift. And she says, allow your story to be witnessed and then receive clarity and next best steps to take on your healing journey. So I think, again, that is absolutely wonderful and fabulous and so generous of her. She's also on Instagram, and I just followed her on Instagram. So that's kind of cool. So lots of good stuff with this conversation. So with that, as always, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.